It's the end of August bank holiday here in London, and so of course my thoughts are starting to turn to all things autumn. Longer nights, cosier evenings, chunkier knits, and so why in the name of hellfire is it 32 degrees? Rude. Hello Pickles, and welcome to episode 28 of the Knitting Vicariously podcast. My name is Caroline. I'm found more commonly across Instagram and Ravelry as dunderknit. I am a knitter living in London, and if this is your first time joining us here on the podcast, a huge hello and welcome to you. As ever, a little word of warning up front to let you know that this is a swearing friendly podcast, and therefore the language is definitely a little bit adult at times. There is definitely a fair bit of cursing to go around, and so if that's not your bag, I totally appreciate it. This won't be the podcast for you, but thank you so much for checking us out anyway. If, however, you are a returning viewer, you've stuck around long enough to know exactly what you're in for, and so welcome back. I really do hope you're well. As I mentioned right up front, it is a rather balmy 32 degrees Celsius here in the UK today, and as I have bemoaned on more than one occasion, we don't really do residential air conditioning, and so yeah, it's pretty gross. I'm not gonna lie. There's a reason that I'm sat here in a t-shirt that is made of linen. And yeah, it's just, I don't like it. I don't like it. I know there's plenty of people that do. You may be one of them. I salute you. Good. Well done. Well done you and your warm weatherness. I am not one of those people. And so I've been alternating with kind of going outside, finding places that are air conditioned, wafting gently in there and spending a bit of time, and then walking out into bright sunshine and being very sticky and just uncomfortable. So yeah, let's not dwell on that too much, but let's just know that it's the end of August, as I say, bank holiday weekend here. That does mean that I've got a lovely day off tomorrow. Today is Sunday, tomorrow is Monday. It will be a bank holiday. It does mean this is going to go up a little bit later than planned because I meant to do a load of stuff yesterday and did precisely none of it. But I did manage to get a little bit of knitting done, so you will feel the benefit of it. Well, for all that you may not think you will. So yes. I don't have a huge amount of admin to mention to you up front, other than to say a massive thank you to everyone who watched the previous episode. It was a bumper gold-along calorie, and I'm so glad that those of you who saw some of your projects there enjoyed a chance to see them. We will have another of those featuring towards the end of the episode, and for anyone who is unaware, the gold-along and indeed the associated calorie is a celebration of all things gold. And as you may know, my definition of gold over here on Knitting Vicariously is broad, to say the least. This is a cal, so a knit along, crochet along, make along, sew along, whatever you wish to bring to the party along. That means that we can celebrate all things Knitting Vicariously later on this year. As I've mentioned previously, I will be attending Rhinebeck in upstate New York later on this year, around about the 19th and 20th of October, I believe. And while I'm there, I would absolutely adore it if anyone who is watching along on Knitting Vicariously, whether you are there on the day or whether you are just there with us vicariously and in spirit, could take part in our Gold Along and just show a little bit of solidarity for all things Knitting Vicariously. You can knit, crochet, you can make whatever you like with whatever means you like, with a colourway that is broadly constituting gold, and as I mentioned, definitions are loose, but as part of that, the whole idea is that if you happen to be at Rhinebeck and you don't feel comfortable coming up and saying hi, that you can just sort of give a little nod to Knitting Vicariously and the fantastic community that we have over here. And if you want to come up and say hi and get hugged, that is absolutely fine too. But also, if you're not able to be there on the day itself, that you still get to take part in all of the solidarity, albeit at a little bit of a distance. I am going to attempt to arrange a bit of a meetup while we are there. It will likely be on the Saturday. It will likely be around about the same time as the podcaster meetup, and exact details of that I will share nearer the time. But yes, to everybody who has been working on their Gold Along projects, you are amazing and they look incredible, and I will be sharing some of those later on today. It's fair to say that the Gold Along has taken a little bit of a hold over my knitting time as well, and so I look forward to sharing some of those things with you momentarily. But in the immediate short term, I just want to mention right here up front that, as ever, show notes for this week's episode can be found in the description box below, as well as over on our Ravelry group. Our Ravelry group you can of course find by searching for Knitting Vicariously in the groups tab on the Ravelry site. I would highly recommend that you stop over and say hi. We have a fantastically active, chatty and just wonderfully supportive group, and of course you are more than welcome to stop by. We have a bunch of different threads, including some around stash storage, around knitting your first sweater, and of course around our favourite vicarious and actual knits. You can also find show notes over on Instagram with the Knitting Vicariously Instagram account, where with each episode I will post a few different hashtag and links to the relevant makers that I mention here on this episode, so you'll be able to find them a little bit more readily and stalk them at your leisure. So first things first, shocker, I have a finished object for you. I know, none of us were expecting that. Very much least of all me. It has been just a crazy busy week. It's been biblically warm, and so the fact that I've spent any time knitting at all is somewhat of a miracle. But the fact that I've managed to crank something out in its entirety, and I do mean its entirety, because I have not even shown this podcast on the project. Strike that, reverse it. This project on the podcast. And yeah, although those of you who do follow me over on Instagram on my dunderknit account, you will have seen a little sneak peek of this, because in fact, if you watched the previous episode, you will also be familiar with this pattern. I spent a little bit of time knitting up the Urban Jungle Hat by Rachel Ilsley. I'll put her pattern picture of it up here on the screen just in case you've forgotten it. And this is a fantastic animal print hat published by Rachel of Unwind Knitwear. And it just so happened that last weekend Rachel was having a sale to celebrate a year of designing. And I posted about it over on Instagram. Hopefully those of you who follow me there were able to grab her pattern at a slight discount, which was very generous of her. But I really couldn't resist casting on, because I mean, really, if you want to be accurate about it, and I am a stickler for the accuracy when I feel like it, then surely it should be gold, right? Because, you know, leopards, cheetahs, things with spots, all these are things that should really be in gold. And so, you know, isn't it amazing? I mean, we'll talk about the giant fuck off pom pom in a minute, but in the meantime, I am in love with this thing. This is my Urban Jungle Hat, as I mentioned, by Rachel Ilsley of Unwind Knitwear. It is fabulous. There are a couple of versions that you can knit. You can knit a version with a folded up brim. I did not. I knit the version with just the straight brim here. And then she has a couple of different sizes. There is a regular size and a slouch size, or so rather, there's a regular size and a large size, and you can choose what needle size you want to knit that with. I ended up going for the size that's knit on 3.5mm needles, which is the sort of smaller needle size, but the larger hat size of the two, if that makes sense. I will put project notes up on my project page over on Ravelry, just to be clear. And the yarns that I used are, this is the Woolfolk tinned in the gold colourway that I brought back from Brooklyn Yarn Store last year when I went over there for Rhinebeck. So fabulous golden yarn here. And the contrast colour that I used is a partial that I had left over. It is Madeline Tosh DK Twist in the toner cartridge colourway, and I will hold it up here for you to see. Apologies for the slight shadow from the camera. I don't have my lights out today because frankly it is stupidly hot enough as it is, and therefore anything that added to that further just wasn't going to happen. But hopefully you can see a little bit of detail here around the pattern. The pattern is fully charted and it is very, very well done for reasons I will come on to in a second. I did an alternating cable cast on, which I have talked about before. It is one of my favourite cast ons to start ribbing, in that it is far less complicated than tubular and you don't need to faff about quite so much with it, but it also gives a really nice edge. So if I hold it up, you should be able to see the cast on here at the bottom. It's also lovely and stretchy. And yeah, it is a simple 1x1 rib around the bottom, and it is knit entirely to pattern, and I love this thing. I will put it on, but I'm going to put it on right at the end of this segment because it's really fucking hot. And sitting here in a linen t-shirt where I'm already overheating slightly and a woolly hat just feels unnecessary. So we'll do that right at the end, but I'll talk to you about it first. So yes, one of the things I really, really like about this pattern is the fact that it is, so with charted patterns, as you may well know for colour work, there's usually a portion of the chart where you are following it for the first instance, and then there is a section that's usually kind of marked with a strong border, which is the part that you then go on to repeat for the rest of the round. And what tends to happen with colour work sometimes is you will sort of knit a row of it, and the front section is broadly almost identical to the repeat section, and it means that when you do sort of come round to the beginning again, usually you get a slight kind of jog or join where you would otherwise expect to see I don't know how best to describe it, but essentially if you had sort of stripes or anything that was quite linear, you'd normally get to the sort of end of one row and then you'll start the next row, and because you are continuing that pattern the whole way across, there's usually right at the end and start of the round a very slight join. One thing that Rachel does that's really clever, and I noticed this as I was going through it, is the beginning and end of the rounds aren't exactly kind of, they correspond quite nicely, if that makes sense. So what you then have, if I turn it round, so actually the back of my hat is around about here, but you don't really notice that it's different from the rest of it because of the way that she staggers it slightly within the pattern. So you'll get to the end of a row having carried out that pattern repeat that's in the bordered box, and then you'll recognise that the beginning of the next row is also kind of similar to that. It's really cleverly done. She's clearly thought a lot about how to avoid that quite sort of a distinctive line that you sometimes get up the back of the pattern. It's just really, really well done. It's otherwise really simple to follow. It's beautifully fun to knit. You do have to pay quite a lot of attention to the chart because it is obviously irregular, and every row is a little bit different, but it's just really good fun. I do of course have the obligatory giant fuck off pom-pom. It is a popper pom-pom and it is one of the ones that I bought from Cowling Country Crafts a long old while ago. Those of you who've been around for a while will know and have spotted when I bought this pom-pom previously. So yes, I will put a link to that in the description box below, but this is a giant extra large pom-pom because I felt it really did merit it in this instance. But yeah, I'm in absolute love with this, and this is definitely going to be the hat that I take with me to Rhinebeck. As I mentioned last time, I didn't really anticipate that I was much of an animal print person, but as we've discovered, I have multiple animal print things in my wardrobe now, and so I figured I'd kind of just got to that point where, you know, a leopard doesn't really change their stripes, and so spots, Caroline, spots, not stripes. Leopards don't have stripes. Also, thank you to everyone that mentioned on the shirt last week. You're like, yeah, it is a funny zebra stripe shirt. Could also be a tiger, Caroline. You're like, yeah, that's literally exactly what it is. It's tiger colours, not funny zebras. Oh man. I'm going to blame the heat, but I don't think that's what it is. Yes, so thank you for that. But here we go. Stripes. I mean, really. I knit this pretty much entirely on higher needles. They are my go-to needles for hats, in particular 16-inch needles, and I think the bottom half was knit on 3.5mm needles and the top half was 3.75, I believe, so US 4s and US 5s. Pretty sure it's that way round. But yeah, really enjoyed working on this. Would highly recommend the pattern, and I'm seriously contemplating knitting another in monochrome colours, because sometimes I wear something other than gold. I know we're all shocked, but occasionally. Right, I can't avoid this any longer. I will now put this hat on for you, and we're going to enjoy it for all of the 30 seconds that I'm able to wear it before I overheat drastically. I love it so much. Isn't it the absolute shit? Oh, I love it. I love it, I love it. So yeah, other than the fact that it's gold, therefore I obviously love it. The giant pom-pom is making me terrifically happy. And just, yeah, it's a perfect, like, slightly slouchy. I have blocked this already. I blocked it late last night. Of course it was dry by this morning because it's biblically hot. But yeah, I absolutely love this hat. And so if you're contemplating it, it's worth doing it. It's worth doing it. And now I am going to take this off before I turn into a gremlin, because me and heat is pretty much the same as gremlins and water, although it's not midnight and I haven't eaten it. Forget I had the analogy. Just, yeah, it's quite hot. Oh, bloody hellfire. Right, okay. It's fine. It's fine. Not overheating at all. Hydration is important. It's very much a thing. Also now I have pom-pom floof on my nose, and that is delightful. Moving along to works in progress this week. There is really just the other one thing that I have been working on. You will know exactly what it is. It is living in my fabulous Bird Street UK project bag with the wonderful vintage cameras on it. As I mentioned last time, I picked this up at Fibre East earlier on in the summer, where I got to just meet some fabulous people, one of which was Bird Street UK and Mr. B Yarns, and yeah, gorgeous stuff on their stand, really beautiful. And they might have posted some pictures of some beautiful gold yarn as well that was coming to their shop in September, and I'm just saying, I'm just saying. But living in here is my shifted sweater by Justina Larkowska. I will put the pattern picture up here on the screen. You are probably familiar with it by now. I have made a little bit more progress on it. I still have about 10 centimeters to go before I separate the front and back to start the sleeves and the armholes, but I will hold it up so you can see where I'm at. And here it is. So my little gold progress keeper here, my little golden sheep, and I will hold it up here for you to see it, because that is my sheep from Hannah, who is the corner of craft and who is a genius with all things beaded stitch marker and progress keeper related. That is where I was last time on the podcast, and so you can see I've put a bit of a dent in it. Probably not as much as I would have done were I not slightly obsessively knitting a leopard print hat, but here we are. This is my shifted sweater. It is of course in gold. I'm going to say that I'm knitting it for the gold along, but mostly the gold along is happening probably in part to facilitate this. I mean, I can get away with that, right? But yes, this is just an absolute beauty. It is definitely going to stretch a little bit more than it looks as though right now. I am knitting the, I think it's the third largest size, so the 45, no sorry, the third size, so the 45-inch chest, I believe. It'll give me a little bit less ease than the pattern actually offers up. I think it'll be closer to around 2 to 3 inches of ease rather than the kind of 6 I think it recommends, but I also reckon I'm going to be able to block it out so it should drape pretty nicely, because the cables are definitely cinching it in a little bit here. The yarn, as I've mentioned in previous weeks, is some stash yarn that I had. It is Madeline Tosh BFL DK in the glazed pecan colourway. I will show you some of it here in the cake. There you have it, that is it caked up there. It is BFL DK rather than Merino DK, which means it is ever so slightly kind of stickier and I want to say slightly woolier to work with rather than the superwash. But that being said, it has a very similar hand to it. It is perhaps a tiny bit, oops, hello. It is a tiny bit thinner than the Merino DK, the twist DK that I've used in the past, but to be honest, gauge here is not a problem at all. In terms of my needles, I am using my Chogus. I use them for pretty much everything. I have an interchangeable set, or rather, I started with one interchangeable set and have since bought a myriad of extra tips and cables to the point where I now probably have multiple interchangeable sets. Strong multiple. But yeah, it is the red cables here, and the needles that I'm using currently are 4mm needles, which is a US size 6, and I used slightly smaller needles for the ribbing. I believe either a 3.5 or a 3.75, I'm not entirely sure, whatever it is that the pattern recommends. But yes, so as I say, I've got about another 10 centimeters to go before I can separate to knit the front and the back, and then it will be picking up and knitting the sleeves straight down. It is a drop shoulder shape, which I really enjoy, and yeah, really looking forward to that. The only other thing I was going to mention is this is the first project where I've ever done alternating skeins by using helical knitting. Now, this is a technique that's been around for a while. There are a number of people who explain it absolutely wonderfully, not least of whom is Grace of Babel's Travels. Grace is a fantastically talented knitter, weaver, dyer, kitten haver extraordinaire, and if you're not already following Grace, you absolutely should be. But she has a fantastic tutorial for helical knitting and alternating skeins in the round. Essentially, the best way of telling you kind of a little bit around the technique itself is, I'm someone who in the past, when I've been knitting with hand-dyed yarn, I would just alternate at the start of a row. I would twist this, the different cakes of yarn so that one is always being carried up underneath the other. It does mean that you are left with a twist on the inside of your knitting, and it also means that because you're sort of pulling it a little bit tighter to avoid there being a hole, you sometimes get a line of stitches up the side seam that are slightly smaller or sort of denser than the rest of your standard knitting. So you do get an ever so slightly visible, not really a line, but just kind of a visible column of stitches that are perhaps a little bit more taut than some of the others, which doesn't usually bother me because it is on the side seam. But I thought, hey, I'm gonna, you know, try new techniques, push the boat out. And so I've been trying it here. I haven't been alternating throughout. What I've actually been doing, pop this up here on the side so you can see, is I knit with one single skein up to around about here, and then started at the sort of last, I want to say maybe like 5th, 6th of that cake. I then started doing a little bit of helical knitting, which I'll touch on in a second. And then once that cake ran out, used the second. Then I've just finished kind of switching those over, so I'm on the 3rd cake currently. But the way that helical knitting works is you're never going to get the same kind of line with it. And I'm going to struggle to explain this, so I would recommend, if you're unfamiliar, it's worth watching a tutorial to really kind of get your head around it. But essentially what you're doing is you're creating a spiral as you knit. And rather than kind of twisting and alternating the rows that you're knitting with it, what you're doing is you're never quite completing a full row with it. You are, you get to the end of one row, you then slip 3 stitches and then start with your next yarn. And when you come to the end, you stop 3 stitches before you did on the previous round, and you slip those 3 and then pick up with the yarn that you dropped on the row before. And all that means is that essentially you're always carrying on with the same yarn. You are shifting back where you start that row, having switched the yarns. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's one of those things that kind of just trust the process and it works. And just, I try not overthink these things too much, because if I do, my brain tends to go, but how does that work with cables? And what if I'm one row here and like just go with it, and I swear it'll make more sense when you actually come to doing it. It's definitely, there was a bit of mindfuckery for me when I first started it, and I started to overthink, and really it's not worth it. Just crack on, you'll be fine. Trust in the process, trust in Grace, for she knows. But yeah, I'm hoping to have a little bit more of a dent in this next time I sit down and talk to you. I'm being fairly monogamous with this when, you know, fun animal print hats aren't stealing my heart and my attention span. So yes, this is definitely going to get a little bit more love, not least because I think Rhinebeck is something like 50 days from now. And that's both amazing and mildly terrifying. So I was planning to get this and another sweater done, and given I haven't even cast on the other sweater, I think that might be a stretch. So I may end up taking one of my existing sweaters as a little bit of a backup, but we shall see. So while that's all the knitting content I have for you, there are some patterns that have caught my eye for us to talk about in our Vicarious section this week. And the first of those is a wonderful pattern that is going to be launched in the upcoming edition of Pom Pom magazine. Pom Pom is a wonderful, wonderful print magazine. It's been around for a good few years now and started out with Megan and Lydia here in London. And the latest version of it is really no exception in terms of the quality that is in there. The pattern in particular that caught my eye though, is a fantastic sweater called Fata Morgana, and I'm going to put it up here on the screen. It is a design by Sylvia Watts Cherry, and you will know Sylvia Watts Cherry as the designer of one of the most incredible sweaters I have ever had the opportunity to lay not only my eyes but my hands on. Indeed, Sylvia is the wonderful With Cherry on Top over on Instagram, and you may well have spotted a sweater that she designed earlier on in the year. She wore it to Vogue Knitting Live, and it is the most incredibly bold, I want to call it like it's genuinely, it feels more like art than it does a knitting design, because it is this fabulous portrait of a beautiful woman, and the colours in this are just absolutely stunning. I'm going to put it here on the screen so you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, seriously. Sylvia is a wonderful designer. I had the absolute pleasure of meeting her at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I then had the subsequent pleasure of meeting and speaking to her again. She actually gave a brief talk at an event I went to earlier on in the summer over in Richmond, where we hopped up to Tribe Yarns immediately afterwards. She talked a little bit about her designing process, both for this and another sweater that she knit, because if you're in the UK, you may well recognise her as well as one of the contestants on Kirsty's Handmade Christmas from a couple of years back. Again, this is a TV show that's here in the UK where there is a, I'm going to say like woefully posh lady, Kirsty Allsop, who invites various different makers to come and take part in a series of crafty challenges. One of the challenges in previous years was a sweater designing contest, and Sylvia designed an amazing, and I'm saying this not only because it's gold, partially because it's gold, but also this beautiful sweater. It looks like a Christmas bauble. It is stunning. There are sequins. It's amazing. But yeah, she is an incredible designer, and this latest sweater pattern is absolutely no exception. This is a gorgeous sweater. It's knit in DK weight yarn. I believe there's a lace weight mohair in there as well, and it is, again, it's that gorgeous sort of slightly boxy shape. It's ever so slightly cropped. It has this fantastic kind of lace texture here on the front. I do believe it's bottom up, and I do believe it's seamed, and those are usually just like little amber warning flags for me, more because of my attention span than anything else. But that being said, I could imagine powering through this fairly quickly, so I'm definitely bearing this one in mind for autumn. In terms of sizing, it is incredibly inclusive. It has a little bit of positive ease in there, and sizing ranges from I think around 33 inches up to about 65. And so again, fantastically inclusive as far as the sizing goes, and just really one to look out for, because I can imagine this being so cozy in the upcoming autumnal months. And it just looks like the perfect sweater for kind of having slightly longer cuffs, pulling them up to your knuckles and just being delightfully warm for those chillier evenings to come, which I am thinking of with great longing. So much longing, so much hot. The second pattern that caught my eye in the last couple of weeks is something that is a little more seasonally appropriate, and this is the Ironwork Tee by Diana Walla. Diana is a fantastic colourwork knitwear designer. She publishes under the name Paper Tiger, but is absolutely someone that you should be following along with. I had, again, the pleasure of meeting Diana at EYF earlier on in the year. She was kind enough to take part in the just abstract nonsense that was the Spare Stitch project, for those of you that have seen that. And yeah, I really love this pattern. It has a lot of elements that I love. Again, it's that slight boxy shape. It is really slightly cropped, so it would sit just nicely on kind of high hip. It has this fabulous colourwork around the bottom. It's knit, the sample is knit in this really gorgeous green colourway. I can see this being a really, really enjoyable knit. It's knit in a fingering weight yarn, and in terms of its construction, it is bottom up, but I think partly because the colourwork is there, I feel like this could be a pretty compelling bottom up knit. I am not normally someone that prefers the bottom up style of knitting. Shifted is proving a little bit sloggy. There are plenty of others that have fallen at far earlier hurdles than we are at right now with Shifted. I am trying to persevere, but certainly with this one, because the colourwork is there to really kind of push you along, I can imagine this being one of the easier bottom up knits to get off the needles if, like me, that is something you struggle with. Again, in terms of sizing, this does a great job on its inclusivity. There's quite a bit of positive ease, words, built into this pattern, around about 7 inches, and in terms of sizing it ranges from just under 39 inches up to 72. So again, really, really inclusive, and just a fantastic pattern that I can imagine being really, really wearable for the kind of shoulder season that should technically be here by now, but really isn't, and I'm gonna let it go. I'm sorry, I'm being overly aggressive about the fact that it's too hot, but it's too hot. And finally, the last pattern for this week is another one that certainly leans toward the cozy, the snuggly, the slightly more autumnal, this time with added cables. And that is the River Jumper by Jennifer Wood. I'll put it up here on the screen. But yes, it certainly, do you know, again, it's the drop shoulder shape. It is that slightly boxy fit. Clearly that is something that I have in my head at the moment, because it's just something that I'm seeing everywhere, and I really do like the styling of it. I appreciate it might not be for everyone, apologies for that, but I really do like it. As you can see, it has these fabulous cables. There's quite a lot of sort of ribbing with the cables as well, which means again it is designed to be something that is knit slightly oversized with a little bit of positive ease so that it hangs well. But yeah, I really, really like this pattern. It's knit in a sport weight yarn, so again, it's something that could be quite a good one for transitioning into those cozier months. But yeah, it's definitely something that caught my eye. Again, there's quite a lot of positive ease in there, so in terms of sizing, you're looking at around about 40 inches up to around 71. I think there's about 6 inches of positive ease, so again, it could do with one smaller size potentially, but it's still pretty broad in terms of its sizing range, which is fantastic. And actually, Jennifer Wood has a lot of really beautiful sweater patterns, and isn't someone that I've really come across before. There's quite a few of hers that I was pouring through and thinking, oh, I could imagine knitting this, I can see knitting this. So definitely someone it's worth checking out if you want to perhaps see something that is a little bit lesser known. Unlike the previous two, I'm pretty sure this pattern is also knit from the top down, so hurrah for those of us with limited attention spans who want to see a little bit of progress a little bit quicker. So yeah, definitely worth checking out Jennifer's patterns, and I hope you find something that you love. But speaking of something that you love, it is high time that we pop on over and see some of your incredible Gold Along projects, because just every time, every week, I'm like, yeah, it can't get better than this. These are amazing. I feel like people are raising the bar, and just some of the ones this week had me stopping in my tracks. I'm trying to split it so that I'm sharing them equally between Instagram and Ravelry, and so this is an Instagram episode, so all of the makers are going to be tagged in the upcoming gallery, and yeah, I hope you enjoy, because man, they are just bloody stunning. Oh, just look at them. See? I mean, I don't want to say I told you so, but I really did tell you so, didn't I? Oh, aren't they stunning? So between the sweaters, the shawls, the socks, it always still makes my heart so happy to see the dunderknit rainbow socks in there as well. Dyed, of course, by Tiny Human Knits, that fantastic self-striping yarn colourway. Just has my heart, it makes me so happy. And of course, just to see how broad you are and liberal all of you are with your own definitions of gold, whether it be a slightly neon-y rose gold all the way through to some rather more neon oranges and kind of amazing speckles that appear as part of that so faded sweater, and just and all the mustards and everything in between. I love it. So if you do want to join us on our gold long, fear not, you still have plenty of time. October the 19th is still a good few weeks away, although perhaps not as many as I need it to be for my shifted, so I really do need to get a wriggle on with that. But yes, of course, you're more than welcome to take part. As I say, it can be knitting, crocheting, sewing, any of these things. Whips are welcomed, and indeed broad definitions of gold are very positively encouraged. But that is pretty much all that I have to share with you for this week. The next episode, it is possible that it's going to be in 3 weeks' time rather than 2. We're coming up to the beginning of September, and my birthday is around about the beginning of September, so I may be taking the week after next off, just as an opportunity to catch up with some friends and spend a little bit of time chilling out in real life. And so it may be round about the middle of September before I am back. I really apologise, but hopefully you will understand. And so yes, it only really remains for me to wish you a wonderful rest of day, rest of week. I hope your knitting is keeping you happy and fulfilled, but if for whatever reason it isn't, I hope you have the opportunity to knit vicariously. Keep on keeping on, and I will see you again very, very soon. Bye. But just, yeah, I absolutely adore this hat. It is between the colours and the print, and it just feels so on trend, and like, I love it so much, but I'm really resisting to put it on because, good lord, it is warm today. I mean, I'm not even going to tell you what's sitting here in my bottom half, because let's just be clear, there's a very good reason that I'm not standing up in front of the camera this week. So, mostly ventilation. I mean, that was oversharing. Ventilation. To be clear, I am wearing something on my bottom half, just not as much as I would do if I were going out socially. This is just going from bad to worse. Clothing. There is definitely clothing on there. It's just less than there would be in social circumstances and situations that I were willing to put my... I'm just gonna put on the fucking hat. I love this thing. I love it. I don't love it enough to want to get it off my head almost immediately. But that's not any reflection on the hat. It is a reflection on the fact that I cannot physically stand the heat, and I need this off my head. Oh, good lord. Oh, crap. Stay cool out there, people. And if you're in Australia and you're looking at me and just kind of going, dude, seriously, we do this on like an average Tuesday. And I mean, good work, but I can't hack it.